I still remember the smell of that office the first time I stepped inside. Leather-polished wood and the faint trace of expensive cologne that clung to the air like it owned the place. It was my first week at the cleaning company, a chance at a new start I desperately needed after years of struggle. My manager had called me into her cramped office and handed me a fresh assignment. "Claire, we've got a premium client downtown, Hale & Partners. They want someone reliable for the top floor. You'll be in charge of the executive suite." I nodded, pretending to be grateful, but inside, my stomach tightened. A law firm in a skyscraper meant more money, but also more pressure. Still, I had no choice. 3 little mouths waited for me at home. Yours. That evening, I rode the elevator up to the 45th floor of a glass tower that seemed to scrape the gray Seattle sky. The carpet was thick beneath my shoes, muffling my steps, as if to remind me I didn't belong there. The receptionist had already gone home, leaving the hallway in silence. I found the brass plaque that read, "Richard Hale, Managing Partner." The name cut through me like a blade. For a moment, I froze my hand hovering over the door handle, pulse racing, vision blurred. Hale. Could it really be him? No. Seattle was full of people. Surely it was coincidence. I forced myself to breathe and pushed open the door. The office was dim city lights pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat a man in a tailored navy suit, flipping through papers. He looked up, and my knees nearly buckled. It was him, Richard Hale, the man who had destroyed my life 5 years earlier. His eyes rested on me cool and distant before settling into a mask of neutrality. "You must be the new cleaning staff," he said, his voice steady as stone. Not a flicker of recognition, not a shadow of guilt. To him, I was no one. "Yes," I whispered, gripping the handle of my mop so tightly, my knuckles turned white. My throat burned, but I forced the word out. He nodded once, already turning back to his documents. "My office is cleaned daily after 7. Get the keys from the administrator. Don't be late." That was it. No sign he knew me. No acknowledgement of the night. I slipped out quickly, pressing my back against the cold wall of the hallway, my chest heaving. The world spun around me. How could fate be this cruel to place me here in his orbit after all I had fought to survive? My hands trembled as memories I had buried clawed their way back. I was 22 then, walking home after evening classes, dreaming of becoming a teacher. That night, I cut through Volunteer Park, a mistake I would regret forever. He came out of nowhere, tall, broad-shouldered, the smell of whiskey and cigars rolling off him. I tried to step aside, but he blocked my path. His voice was slurred, but sharp. When I begged to pass, he grabbed my arm. My screams echoed through the trees. No one came. What followed was pain, terror, and the suffocating weight of his body. When it was over, he fixed his suit, smoothed his tie, and walked away as if nothing had happened. I lay broken on the damp ground, nameless, voiceless. And now, 5 years later, he sat in front of me, powerful, respected, his reputation spotless. When I found out I was pregnant, the world collapsed beneath me. Sitting in a cramped clinic in North Seattle, I stared at the paper that read positive. Pregnant. The word barely made sense. I was only 22, still clinging to dreams of teaching. Then the doctor's calm voice shattered my thoughts, not just pregnant, but carrying triplets. My mind couldn't grasp it. I walked home in silence, the city lights blurring as the bus rattled past Capitol Hill. My fiancé, at the time Daniel, had promised a future together. But when I showed him the test, his face drained of color. Excuses spilled out money timing school, and then he left without looking back. That night, I stood at the window of our tiny apartment, clutching my stomach, feeling more alone than I thought possible. My parents in Oregon were horrified when they found out. 3 children out of wedlock. Claire, what have you done? My father couldn't look at me. My mother wept. They offered a small monthly check, but their disappointment cut deeper than their absence. 9 months felt like an eternity. My body ballooned under the weight of 3 lives pressing against my ribs. Sleep vanished. And then came the stormy February night at Seattle General, when hours of contractions blurred into screams. Ethan arrived first, his cry sharp and insistent. Sophie followed seconds later, tiny but fierce. Then Lila, fragile as a whisper. 3 little faces wrinkled and red fists clenched against the cold. I wept not from joy, but from the sheer weight of it all. 3 children, no father, no steady income, no plan, only me. The years that followed were a battlefield. I moved into a basement apartment in Rainier Valley walls, cracked the heater barely working. At night, I lined up the cribs side by side, praying none of them would wake, though they always did. Feedings, diaper changes, midnight fevers, every hour blurred into the next. My body ached from exhaustion. I lived in a haze of formula stains, laundry piles, and the constant hum of survival. There were nights I stood in the kitchen staring at an empty fridge, calculating whether to pay rent late or skip meals. My hands trembled when I used food stamps at the grocery store, the pitying glances of strangers burning into me. And then, out of the coldness, there was Mrs. Whitmore, an elderly widow down the hall, gray hair tied in a bun, voice raspy but kind. She had no family nearby. One afternoon, after hearing the babies cry for hours, she knocked gently. "Honey, you need rest. Let me help." From that day, she became my lifeline. She rocked Ethan to sleep when I couldn't. She taught Sophie her first lullabies. She whispered prayers over Lila's fragile chest when she wheezed at night. And when I took on night shifts, stocking shelves, wiping tables, scrubbing offices, Mrs. Whitmore sat quietly in my living room knitting while the children slept. Still, even with her kindness, the weight never lifted. Bills piled higher than paychecks. My dreams of teaching withered, yet every morning when I saw 3 pairs of bright eyes staring back at me, I told myself to keep moving. For them, I would endure anything. When my trial period at the cleaning company ended, they gave me a permanent assignment. Hale and Partners. My supervisor said, sliding the clipboard toward me. "Big firm. They pay well, but they're particular. Don't miss a shift." I stared at the name Hale, my throat tightening. I had spent weeks convincing myself the night in his office was coincidence. But now, printed in black and white, there was no denying it. Richard Hale wasn't just a partner, he was the partner. The first evening I walked back into that skyscraper, every step echoed like a verdict. The polished marble floors, the hushed lobby, the gold lettering on the firm's directory, it all reeked of power. I swiped my badge, rode the elevator to the 45th floor, and stood outside his office again. My palms were damp. My body remembered him before my mind could bury the memories. When I stepped inside, he barely looked up. "You again," he said flatly. His tone carried no recognition, only indifference. That almost hurt more. I wanted to scream. "Do you really not remember? Do you not see what you did to me every time you look at my face?" But my lips remained sealed. Instead, I moved about the office like a shadow dusting shelves lined with law books and trophies, vacuuming the thick carpet, emptying his wastebasket. All while, he sat behind his desk signing contracts worth more than I earned in a year. Every glimpse of his name embossed in gold burned my chest. Rage tangled with fear, but beneath it all was helplessness. I needed this job. My children needed food. Rent needed paying. That reality chained my anger into silence. And then there was the picture. It sat proudly on the corner of his desk, in a silver frame gleaming under the lamplight. A woman with perfect blonde hair smiled effortlessly, a pearl necklace at her throat. Beside her stood a boy, maybe 11, in a private school blazer, his eyes bright with certainty. A perfect family, frozen in glossy stillness. Each night, as I wiped his desk, my eyes landed on that photograph. My heart clenched. How could he sit surrounded by wealth, prestige, and love while I scraped together pennies to feed our children, the children he didn't even know existed? Two worlds had collided, his full of control and comfort, mine of exhaustion and hunger. Each night I rode the elevator down, clutching my tote bag, whispering to myself, "Don't look back. Don't let him see you break. Your children are waiting." That was all that mattered. But no matter how tightly I held my composure, each shift chipped away at me, every polished surface reflecting not just his face, but my broken past staring back. It began with a cough, faint at first, easy to dismiss as another winter bug. Seattle's damp air always clung to the lungs, and the children had endured more than their share of fevers. But within days, Sophie's cough deepened, rattling her small chest, and by the third night she was burning with fever, her frail body trembling in my arms. I rushed her to Seattle Children's Hospital, my heart hammering with dread as fluorescent lights blurred overhead. Doctors examined, listened, tested. The word came like a blade pneumonia. They would begin treatment immediately, but even relief was short-lived. The antibiotics she needed were not fully covered by Medicaid, and the out-of-pocket cost was more than I made in a month. I sat in a plastic chair outside her room, staring at the numbers until they blurred. I thought of selling the stroller, pawning the wedding ring I had hidden away, begging my parents for more money. Nothing would come close. Every second wasted was another second Sophie's lungs fought for air. The following evening, after cleaning Richard Hale's office, I dropped my tote bag and scattered papers across the polished floor. Among them was the hospital bill, the cruel numbers glaring like a spotlight. I scrambled to gather them, but not before he looked up. "What's that?" His voice was sharp, curious. "Nothing," I muttered, shoving the papers into a folder. He leaned back, studying me. "Doesn't look like nothing." I bit my lip, holding back tears. The weight of it all cracked through me, and before I could stop myself, my voice broke. "It's my daughter. She's sick. The medicine costs more than I can make in a month. I don't know what to do." For a long moment, he was silent. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook, and wrote swiftly. He slid the paper across the desk. I stared at it, stunned. The amount was more than enough, not only for the medicine, but for the hospital stay and follow-ups. "I can't take this," I whispered, pushing it back. His eyes locked onto mine, steady, unreadable. "You can, and you will. Children shouldn't suffer because of money or pride." I wanted to scream, to throw the check in his face, to remind him that he was the reason I stood there begging for scraps of mercy. But Sophie's pale face flashed before me. Pride wouldn't save her. This would. With trembling hands, I accepted. Days later, she came home, her fever broken, her laughter faint but alive. Watching her twirl weakly in faded pajamas, gratitude and disgust tore at me. Gratitude that she lived, disgust that her life had been bought with money from the man who had destroyed mine. After that night, something shifted. Richard began noticing me in ways he never had before. He asked about my schedule, about the commute, about the children. At first, I brushed it off as empty courtesy, but then came his offer. "It isn't right for you to drag 3 kids across town every day on the bus. I'll arrange a car." The words fell heavy on me. A car? Something ordinary for others, but unthinkable for me. My instincts screamed to refuse. It felt like another chain binding me to him. But the practical part of me, the mother who carried groceries in the rain with children clinging to her coat, knew what it meant. I nodded stiffly. "Thank you." The words tasted like ash. One Saturday, when the children begged for fresh air, I took them to Volunteer Park. The pale sun gave them joy as they ran across the grass. Ethan darted ahead, his serious jaw, too, grown for 8 years. That was when I saw her. A tall woman in a cream coat, blonde hair, shining pearls at her ears, even on a weekend. She walked a golden retriever and paused when Ethan ran past. Her gaze locked on him, lips parting, as if staring at a ghost. I knew her face from the photo on Richard's desk, his wife. She studied Ethan, then the other 2 children, trailing after me, then me. My blood drained cold. She saw the resemblance. Ethan was his mirror image. I tugged the children toward the playground, heart thundering. All afternoon terror gnawed at me. If she spoke to him, if she pressed her suspicion, the fragile wall I'd built would crumble. That night, I barely slept, every creak in the apartment, a verdict closing in. The following week, while I cleaned his office, Richard spoke without looking up. "Claire." His tone was low, careful. "Your children, Ethan, Sophie, Lila, are they mine?" The room spun. My knees weakened. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, always swearing I would deny, deflect, protect. But faced with his searching eyes, the truth clawed out. Tears burned hot as I whispered, "Yes." The word hung between us like shattered glass. 5 years I had carried this burden alone. With one word, the silence was broken. He leaned back, shaken for the first time since I'd seen him again. His voice cracked. "I didn't know. Claire, I swear I didn't know." I wanted to laugh, to scream, to smash the polished wood of his desk. How could he claim ignorance? Before I could speak, he went on. 5 years ago, I was a different man. I drank too much. I partied. I was reckless. I don't remember that night in the park the way you do. I only remember waking hungover in a stranger's apartment. I didn't think about who I hurt. He buried his face in his hands. God help me. I didn't think. My body trembled. "You ruined me," I whispered. "You left me with scars that will never fade. You left me with 3 children to raise alone." His eyes lifted glassy. "And they're mine, my children. Claire, let me try to make this right. Let me support them. School, healthcare, college, whatever they need. Please don't shut me out. I can't change the past, but I can be here now." Anger surged hot through me. I slammed the duster onto his desk. "You think money will fix this? You think writing checks erases what you did?" He flinched, but didn't retreat. "No, I can't erase it. But I can be a father. Let me carry some of this burden for them, if not for you." I shook my head, tears blurring the room. I wanted to banish him, to lock every door. But fear rooted inside me. Fear of what he might do if I refused. He had wealth, influence, power. If he pressed for custody, I could lose them. He had already taken so much, I could not risk losing my children too. Whispers soon swirled through the firm. His wife appeared less and less at company events. Then one morning, I entered his office to see a manila envelope on his desk. Divorce papers, her name neatly typed. Richard saw me glance at them and laughed bitterly. "She knows. Maybe not the details, but she saw Ethan's face. She couldn't unsee it. She doesn't want to fight just to be free. I said nothing. A flicker of satisfaction twisted inside me justice in its cruelest form, but I recoiled at it too. His broken family could never compare to the years I had lived broken and alone. He looked at me, weariness etched in his face. Claire, I've lost everything. My wife, my home, my reputation. But I will not lose those kids. I'll stand by them no matter what you say. I clutched my tote tighter, my voice low but fierce. They are mine. I raised them. Don't forget that. His reply came soft but steady. Ours. They're ours. The ground beneath me shifted again. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this, the man I hated more than anyone becoming the only other person bound to my children by blood. It was Ethan who fell ill first. My strong, serious boy, the one who carried groceries for me, who hushed his sisters when I was too tired to speak. He had been pale for weeks, and I told myself it was the rain, the gray skies. Then came the bruises, dark smudges across his arms, too many to explain away. When his nose bled in the night, soaking his pillow, I knew. At Seattle Children's Hospital, I sat trembling while doctors whispered outside. When they entered, their faces bore the gravity of men accustomed to devastation. Acute leukemia, the pediatric oncologist said gently. We need to act quickly. The words echoed until they lost all meaning. My son had leukemia. Tests began at once. Blood draws, bone marrow biopsies, endless forms. Each result crushed me further. His sisters weren't a match. I wasn't a match. No one in the registry surfaced. Days passed, his condition worsened, and I felt the world closing in. Then Richard asked to be tested. At first, I thought it a performance, another intrusion, but when the results came back, the doctor pulled us aside. He's a perfect match. Better than we could have hoped. I stared in disbelief. Of course he was. The man who had destroyed me was the only one who could save my child. The transplant was scheduled within days. I sat outside the operating room clutching a worn photo of the children at the park, while Richard lay on one table, Ethan on another. They harvested marrow from Richard's hip bones, liters of it, enough to flow into Ethan's veins. The process was brutal. Hours of anesthesia, days of pain. But Richard did not flinch. When they wheeled him into recovery, pale and groaning, I stood at the foot of his bed. His eyes fluttered open glassy, and he forced a faint smile. Now part of me lives inside you, son, he whispered hoarsely. I turned away, tears spilling. For the first time in 5 years, I saw him not as the monster from the park, but as a father, bleeding himself dry to save his child. The days that followed the transplant blurred into a haze of monitors, sterile corridors, and whispered prayers. Ethan's body fought valiantly, rejecting accepting, teetering between life and death. I lived in that hospital chair, clutching his hand, watching numbers climb and fall on machines I barely understood. Richard, despite his pain, came every day, walking slowly with a cane, wincing when he sat. He brought books, for Ethan crayons for the girls, small things that meant more than I could say aloud. When Ethan finally opened his eyes one morning, weak but smiling, the weight crushing my chest loosened. The doctor spoke cautiously of remission, of chances renewed. Relief washed through me like sunlight breaking after endless rain. Across the room, Richard sat in the corner, pale and exhausted, but his shoulders dropped in relief, as if he too had been holding his breath all along. In the weeks that followed, Ethan regained his strength little by little. His cheeks grew color, his laughter returned, and with it came something I had not expected: Richard's presence in our ordinary lives. At first, it was small, a visit after work, a ride to the hospital. Then he appeared outside the school with an umbrella shielding Sophie and Lila from drizzle as they skipped toward me. Another time, he brought cupcakes for Sophie's birthday, standing awkwardly in our apartment while children crowded the table. And at Christmas, he surprised us with a tree taller than I was, lights already strung delivered straight to our living room. I tried to resist. I told myself it was dangerous to let him in. His presence tangled knots in my life tighter. But children don't carry grudges the way adults do. To them, he wasn't the ghost of my past. He was the man who showed up with gifts, who clapped loudly at Ethan's school play, who bent to tie Lila's shoelaces in the park. The words slipped out one evening when Ethan tugged at his sleeve.